Welcome back Coinology, welcome back everyone. Today we are going deep, very deep, into one of the most misunderstood, most talked about, and most searched Lincoln pennies in American coin history, the 1-cent coin dated 1962 with the D mint mark, a small copper coin that looks ordinary in your hand but carries a story so massive, so layered, and so controversial that collectors around the world still argue about its true potential, its hidden varieties, and the shocking prices that certain rare examples have achieved or are claimed to have achieved in private markets and elite auctions, and in this video series we are not rushing anything, we are opening every door slowly, carefully, and completely, so sit back, listen closely, and let your mind absorb every detail because once you understand this coin fully, you will never look at a penny the same way again. The 1962 D Lincoln cent was struck at the Denver Mint during a time when the United States was still firmly using solid copper alloy for its 1-cent coins, long before the switch to zinc cores, and this alone already gives the coin a different physical presence compared to modern cents, because when you hold a 1962 D penny in your fingers, you are holding nearly pure metal value, a coin composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, giving it a rich reddish-brown tone when fresh and a deep chocolate color as it ages, and the official standard weight of this coin is 3.11 grams, a number that's serious. Collectors memorize because even a slight deviation in weight can be the first clue that you are holding something unusual, something rare, or something that was not meant to leave the mint in the form it did. On the obverse side of the coin, the face that most people see first, we find the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, and by 1962 this portrait had already become one of the most recognized images in the world, but what many people do not realize is that small details in Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, and even the lettering around him can vary from die to die, and these tiny differences are exactly where big money sometimes hides, because collectors are not just buying a penny, they are buying a moment in minting history. Frozen in copper above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, to the left is the date 1962, and just below the date sits the small but powerful letter D, the mint symbol indicating Denver, and that single letter completely changes the story of the coin, because while Philadelphia minted coins without a mint mark and San Francisco produced fewer pieces, Denver struck hundreds of millions of 1962 D cents, flooding circulation, which is why most people assume the coin is common and worthless. But rarity in coin collecting does not always come from low mintage numbers alone, it comes from errors, anomalies, transitional moments, and conditions that were never supposed to happen. Turning the coin over to the reverse side, we see the familiar wheat ears design, with two curved stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, with the Latin motto E pluribus unum above, and this was the final era of the wheat cent design, which would end just 7 years later in 1958. Actually ended earlier, correction, 1958 was last wheat cent, 1962 is memorial reverse? Wait, no, this is important, and this is exactly why so many people get confused, because the 1962 D cent does not have wheat ears, it has the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, introduced in 1959, showing the Lincoln Memorial building with Lincoln himself faintly visible inside if the strike is sharp enough, and this detail alone separates casual coins from premium examples, because a fully struck memorial with clear steps and a visible seated Lincoln indicates strong die pressure and excellent preservation. The reverse also includes the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 1 cent, and again, variations in spacing, thickness, and alignment of these letters have created entire subcategories of collectibles within the 1962 D cent family, including doubled dies, repunched mint marks, die cracks, die clashes, and off-metal strikes, each one telling a story of human error, mechanical stress, or rushed production during a period when the US Mint was under pressure to produce enormous quantities of coins for a growing economy. Now let us talk about the value, because this is where emotions run high, rumors explode, and misinformation spreads faster than truth, and yet behind the noise there are real documented sales, real collector demand, and real money changing hands, because in ordinary circulated condition, a typical 1962 D penny is worth only a few cents above face value, mainly for its copper content, but once condition improves, once we move into uncirculated territory, the numbers begin to climb, and in high mint state grades, especially MS66, MS67, and above, certified by professional grading services, prices can reach hundreds and even thousands of dollars for coins with exceptional luster, perfect surfaces, and razor-sharp strikes, but the real explosions in value come from rare error varieties, and this is where claims of massive prices, including figures that reach into the millions or are sensationally described as tens of millions, begin to circulate, because certain one-of-a-kind or nearly unique error coins, such as dramatic doubled dies with extreme doubling visible to the naked eye, or coins struck on the wrong planchet, or experimental metal compositions that were never officially released, can become legendary, and when two elite collectors want the same coin and there is no second example available, the price is no longer guided by price guides, it is guided by desire, pride, and competition. Stories have circulated for years about a 1962 D cent with an extraordinary mint error, privately sold, never publicly auctioned, rumored to have reached astronomical figures, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes misunderstood, and sometimes intentionally inflated by sellers or promoters, and while claims of $23,000 million must be approached with extreme skepticism and critical thinking, the reason such stories exist at all is because the coin series has produced genuine rarities that defy normal valuation logic, and in the world of ultra-high-end numismatics, documented private transactions are not always public, fueling mystery and speculation. Historically, the year 1962 itself is significant, placed firmly in the Cold War era, during John F. Kennedy's presidency, just before the Cuban Missile Crisis, at a time when America was expanding, modernizing, and consuming copper at enormous rates, and this economic pressure would eventually lead to changes in coin composition. But in 1962 the mint was still producing heavy, solid copper cents, and the dies were working overtime, increasing the likelihood of mistakes, misalignments, and fatigue-related errors that collectors now hunt relentlessly. What makes the 1962 D penny especially fascinating is that it sits at the crossroads between old-style craftsmanship and industrial mass production, meaning that while machines dominated the process, human oversight and manual adjustments still played a role, and every adjustment introduced risk, and every risk introduced the possibility of a coin that should not exist, and when such a coin escapes into circulation or is saved unnoticed for decades, it becomes a time capsule, waiting for the right person, the right microscope, and the right knowledge to unlock its true identity. As we move forward in this series, we will go even deeper into specific known varieties, how to identify them at home, how weight, magnetism, sound, and visual clues can separate ordinary cents from extraordinary ones, and how grading, preservation, and timing can mean the difference between a forgotten penny and a life-changing discovery. So stay with me, because this is only the beginning, and part 1 is simply laying the foundation, preparing your eyes, your mind, and your expectations for what comes next, because the 1962 D Lincoln cent is not just a coin, it is a battlefield of facts versus myths, patience versus greed, and knowledge versus luck, and those who learn the most are always the ones who win in the end. As we move deeper now, the story of the 1962 D Lincoln cent becomes less about what everyone knows and more about what very few people ever bother to study, because this is the stage where casual interest separates from serious obsession, and where the difference between an ordinary coin and an extraordinary one begins to reveal itself through patience, magnification, and an understanding of how the minting process actually worked in the early 1960s, when speed often mattered more than perfection. At the Denver Mint in 1962, presses were running relentlessly, striking hundreds of thousands of coins per hour, day after day, and every single one of those coins depended on steel dies that were themselves hand-prepared, hubbed, polished, and replaced when they wore out or cracked, and this constant cycle of use and replacement is the birthplace of many of the errors and varieties that collectors dream about today, because no two dies were truly identical, and no die lasted forever in perfect condition. Point 1 of the most important things to understand about the 1962 D cent is strike quality, because Denver coins from this year are known for a wide range of strike strengths, from soft and mushy details to razor-sharp examples that look almost sculpted, and this variation plays a huge role in value, especially when we talk about Lincoln's hair above the ear, the beard line, and the bow tie area, which are all high points of the design and the first to show weakness when a die is tired or pressure is insufficient. On the reverse side, the Lincoln Memorial is the ultimate test of quality, because many 1962 D cents show weak steps, blurred columns, or flat lettering, but when you find an example with crisp steps, deep column separation, and even a faint but visible seated Lincoln statue inside the memorial, you are already dealing with a coin that stands far above average, and when such a coin is combined with blazing original red luster and clean surfaces, the value multiplies dramatically. Weight, again, becomes critical here, because the correct standard of 3.11 grams is not just a number, it is a diagnostic tool, and collectors who hunt for major rarities often begin with a precise digital scale, checking every 1962 D cent they encounter, looking for deviations that could signal an off-metal strike, a clipped planchet, or an improperly alloyed blank, and while most will weigh exactly as expected, the few that do not are the ones that demand further investigation. Sound is another overlooked clue, because when dropped gently onto a hard surface, a solid copper cent produces a distinct ringing tone compared to zinc-based cents of later years, and while this does not identify rarity on its own, it reinforces the authenticity of the metal, which becomes especially important when rumors circulate about experimental compositions, transitional alloys, or foreign planchets being struck accidentally at the Denver Mint during periods of heavy production. Now let us talk more openly about errors, because this is where the imagination of the collecting world truly ignites, and where prices begin to escape logic and enter the realm of legend, as doubled die errors, though far rarer for 1962 D than for some other years, do exist in minor and sometimes dramatic forms, and when true hub doubling is present, it affects not just one letter but entire portions of the design, creating a shadow-like doubling that cannot be replicated by damage or machine doubling. Repunched mint marks are another category that deserves attention, because in 1962 mint marks were still punched into the working dies by hand, meaning a human operator physically struck the D into the die, sometimes more than once, sometimes at slightly different angles, and this resulted in mint marks that show doubling, tilting, or extra impressions, and while many of these are subtle, advanced collectors pay significant premiums for clear, well-documented examples. Die cracks and die breaks also play a role in value, especially when they are dramatic and visually striking, because as dies aged and metal fatigue set in, cracks formed, sometimes extending across Lincoln's portrait or through the memorial, and in extreme cases pieces of the die broke away entirely, creating raised blobs of metal on the coin known as cut errors, and while some collectors dismiss these as damage, specialists recognize them as legitimate mint errors that capture the final moments of a die's life. Die clashes add another layer of fascination, because when a press cycles without a planchet in place, the obverse and reverse dies slam into each other, transferring ghostly images of one side onto the other, and on 1962 descents, these clashes can sometimes be seen as faint outlines of letters or architectural elements appearing where they should not exist, creating coins that look haunted by their own design. And now, when all of these factors converge, perfect strike, pristine surfaces, blazing original color, and a major error or variety, the value equation changes completely. And this is where stories begin to circulate about coins selling for unimaginable sums, sometimes in public auctions, sometimes in private transactions between elite collectors, and sometimes only whispered about in numismatic circles, fueling claims of valuations reaching into the tens of millions. It is essential to understand that the ultra-high end of the coin market operates very differently from everyday collecting, because these transactions are often private, undocumented, and driven by individuals or institutions with resources beyond normal comprehension. And when a coin is truly unique, or believed to be unique, traditional price guides become irrelevant, replaced by negotiation, secrecy, and prestige. The idea of a 1962 cent being associated with a figure like $23,000 million is not something that should be accepted casually or repeated blindly, but it exists in the conversation because of how myth, marketing, misunderstanding, and genuine rarity can blend together, especially online, where dramatic numbers attract attention and hope, and where the dream of finding a life-changing coin in pocket change never truly dies. Historically, many of the world's most valuable coins were once ordinary objects, ignored for years, sometimes decades, before being recognized for what they were, and this historical truth is what keeps people searching rolls, jars, and collections inherited from relatives, because every rare coin is rare only after it is discovered, identified, and understood, and until that moment, it is just another piece of metal. As we continue this journey, the next part will take us even further into identification techniques, professional grading, certification, and how the market decides what is real value and what is hype, because knowing the coin is only half the battle, and knowing how to navigate the world around it is what truly separates winners from dreamers. And this story of the 1962 Lincoln cent is far from finished. Now we enter a stage where knowledge becomes power, because understanding the 1962 Lincoln cent is no longer just about history or curiosity, it is about recognition, verification, and survival in a market filled with excitement, exaggeration, and sometimes deliberate deception. And this is where many people fail, not because they lack luck, but because they lack discipline and method. The first thing every serious collector learns is that seeing is not enough, because the human eye lies, especially when hope is involved, and this is why magnification becomes essential, not optional, when studying a 1962 cent, because under 5 times, 10 times, or even 20 times magnification, details emerge that simply do not exist at normal viewing distance, and these details are what separate true mint errors from damage, wear, or post-mint alterations. When examining the date 1962, collectors look closely at the shape of each numeral, the thickness of the digits, the spacing between the 1 and 9, the curve of the 6, and the tail of the 2, because true doubled dies will show consistent, rounded doubling that follows the design, not flat, shelf-like shadows that indicate machine doubling, and this distinction alone saves collectors thousands of dollars and years of disappointment. The mint mark D deserves its own intense study, because repunched mint marks often show a secondary impression either inside the main letter or just outside its edges, and this secondary impression will be rounded and raised, not jagged or cut, and it will match the shape of a D exactly, because it was made by the same punch, not by damage or contact. And learning to recognize this can turn a 5-cent coin into a 3-figure or 4-figure collectible. Surface texture is another silent storyteller, because original mint luster flows in radial lines from the center of the coin outward, and when a coin has been cleaned, polished, or altered, these lines are broken or replaced by unnatural scratches and shine, and while a clean 1962 cent may look bright to a beginner, it is often worth less than a naturally toned example with honest wear, because the market punishes alteration harshly. Color plays a powerful role in value as well, because copper reacts with air, moisture, and handling, slowly changing from bright red to red-brown and eventually brown, and grading services classify copper cents accordingly, with full red examples commanding massive premiums, especially when they have survived more than 60 years without losing their original color, a rare achievement that suggests careful storage and minimal handling. Now we must talk about professional grading, because this is where dreams meet reality, and where claims either collapse or are confirmed, because certification by major grading services provides authentication, grading consistency, and market confidence, and without it, even a genuine rarity may struggle to achieve its true value, because buyers at the high end demand proof, not stories. The grading process evaluates strike, luster, surface preservation, color, and eye appeal, and for a 1962 cent to reach elite grades, it must be nearly flawless, with no distracting marks, no spots, no corrosion, and no signs of mishandling. And the difference between an MS-65 and an MS-67 can mean the difference between a few $100s and several thousand, sometimes more, depending on demand and population reports. Population reports themselves are another crucial element, because they show how many coins of a given date and grade have been certified, and scarcity at the top levels is often extreme, because while millions were minted, very few were saved in perfect condition, and even fewer survived decades without damage, making top-grade examples disproportionately valuable. The market for high-end Lincoln cents is driven not only by collectors, but also by registry set competition, where individuals compete to build the highest-graded sets possible, and in this environment, a single coin can become the missing piece that completes a set, driving prices far beyond what logic alone would suggest, because pride, ranking, and recognition become part of the value equation. This is also the environment where extraordinary claims circulate, because when a coin is believed to be unique or nearly unique, numbers lose meaning, and negotiation replaces guides. And while public auctions provide transparency, private sales do not, allowing rumors of astronomical prices to grow unchecked, especially when sellers benefit from the mystique. It is vital, therefore, to approach every claim with healthy skepticism, especially those involving figures like $23,000 million, because while the top coins in the world do sell for millions, such values are reserved for historically unique, widely documented pieces with global recognition. And any claim involving a modern-era cent must be backed by extraordinary evidence, yet skepticism does not mean dismissal, because the history of numismatics is filled with surprises, and coins once dismissed as common have later been reclassified as rare due to new discoveries, improved research, or previously unknown varieties, and this is why collectors continue to study, publish, and debate, keeping the field alive and evolving. As we continue, the next part will explore real-world case studies, known high-value sales, and the psychological forces that drive people to believe, buy, and sometimes overpay. Because understanding the human side of the market is just as important as understanding the metal, and the story of the 1962 descent is as much about people as it is about copper. Now the discussion moves into territory that many people avoid, not because it is unimportant, but because it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about hype, belief, and the powerful psychology that surrounds rare coins, especially modern-era coins like the 1962 Lincoln cent, where the line between genuine rarity and exaggerated storytelling can easily blur if knowledge is replaced by emotion. In the real world of numismatics, value is not created by age alone, nor by rumors alone, but by a combination of verified rarity, demand, condition, and trust. And this is why case studies matter so much, because they ground the conversation in reality. Even when the prices themselves seem unreal to ordinary people, there have been documented sales of Lincoln cents reaching six figures and beyond, particularly for extreme errors, top population examples, or historically significant varieties, and when these sales occur, they send shockwaves through the collecting community, inspiring thousands of people to re-examine their collections and pocket change, hoping lightning might strike twice. These sales are not accidents, they are the result of years of study, verification, and exposure to the right buyers at the right moment. When a high-grade 1962 descent appears in a major auction, its performance is shaped by several forces acting at once. First is visibility, because a coin placed in a prestigious auction house gains instant credibility and attention. Second is competition, because when two or more advanced collectors want the same coin, price becomes secondary to victory. Third is narrative, because a coin with a compelling backstory, such as a rare die state or a dramatic error, attracts emotional investment, not just financial interest. Private sales, however, are where myths often begin, because they lack transparency. When a coin changes hands privately, the price may never be publicly confirmed, yet stories spread, numbers inflate, and soon a four-figure sale becomes a seven-figure legend. Over time, repetition hardens rumor into belief, and belief becomes fact in online spaces. Even without evidence, the number $23,000 million exists in this environment of exaggeration and aspiration, and while it is almost certainly not a documented, verifiable market price for a 1962 descent, it represents something powerful, the dream that something small, overlooked, and ordinary can become extraordinary beyond imagination. This dream is not foolish, it is human, and it is the same dream that has driven treasure hunting, archaeology, and collecting for centuries. Understanding market cycles is essential here, because coin values rise and fall with broader economic conditions, collector demographics, and trends within the hobby. When new collectors enter the market, demand for popular series like Lincoln cents increases, pushing prices higher. When interest fades or shifts, prices stabilize or decline. The 1962 descent sits in a stable but quietly active segment of the market, where top quality and unusual examples continue to perform well. Another factor often ignored is survival rate. While hundreds of millions of 1962 descents were minted, the number that survive today in pristine condition is tiny, and the number with major errors is microscopic. Most were spent, worn down, damaged, or melted indirectly through loss and destruction, and this natural attrition is what transforms mass-produced objects into collectibles over time. Collectors who succeed long-term are those who separate fantasy from probability while still leaving room for possibility. They understand that not every coin will be valuable, but every coin deserves careful examination, because rarity often hides in plain sight, visible only to those who know exactly what to look for. In the next stage of this exploration, we will move away from theory and psychology and into practical strategy, how collectors actually search for coins, how they decide what to keep, what to submit for grading, and what to let go, because the difference between a hoard of copper and a curated collection is intention, knowledge, and restraint, and the journey of the 1962 Lincoln cent continues to teach these lessons quietly, one coin at a time. At this point, the journey becomes practical, grounded in real behavior rather than theory, because the collectors who actually discover valuable coins are not relying on luck alone, they are following routines, habits, and systems that dramatically increase their odds, and the 1962 D Lincoln cent, despite its reputation as a common coin, is still actively searched today by people who understand that repetition and patience are the true engines of discovery many serious collectors begin with. Coin roll hunting, a process that sounds simple but requires discipline, where rolls of cents are obtained from banks, opened carefully, searched methodically, and either kept, set aside, or returned, and within this repetitive process, the same dates appear again and again, including 1962 D, which is why training your eye to spot anomalies quickly becomes essential, because hesitation slows you down and fatigue causes mistakes. A skilled searcher can examine hundreds of coins per hour, instantly rejecting heavily worn examples while pausing on those with unusual color, sharp strikes, or strange surface features, and over time the brain learns patterns, recognizing what is normal and what is not almost subconsciously, and it is often this subconscious recognition that leads to the discovery of something special. Another strategy involves inherited collections in old jars, because many families saved pennies casually during the mid-20th century, storing them in coffee cans, drawers, or piggy banks, untouched for decades, and these collections often contain coins that were never circulated heavily, preserved simply because no one needed them, and within such accumulations, high-grade 1962 D cents occasionally appear, sometimes still red, sometimes lightly toned, waiting to be noticed. Once a potential candidate is found, the next step is isolation, because mixing coins leads to damage, confusion, and loss of information, and experienced collectors immediately place promising coins into non-PVC holders, labeling them with date, mint, weight, and any observed anomalies, creating a paper trail that preserves both the coin and its context. Documentation is more powerful than most beginners realize, because when a coin is eventually submitted for grading or offered for sale, clear records increase credibility and confidence. And they also help the collector remember why the coin mattered in the first place, preventing emotional decisions driven by hype or impatience. Submission for professional grading is not taken lightly, because it costs money and time, and submitting every interesting coin is a fast way to lose both, so collectors learn to pre-screen carefully, comparing their coins to known examples, studying online databases, and consulting reference books before deciding that a coin is truly worthy of certification. The emotional challenge here is restraint, because the idea that a coin could be life-changing creates pressure to act quickly. But the most successful collectors move slowly, understanding that haste leads to mistakes, misidentification, and disappointment, while patience allows knowledge to compound and confidence to grow. When a graded coin returns with confirmation of a rare variety or a high grade, the experience is transformative, not just financially, but psychologically, because it validates years of effort and study, reinforcing the belief that knowledge truly matters, and this reinforcement keeps people in the hobby for life. At the same time, collectors must learn to let go, because not every coin will meet expectations, and chasing sunk costs leads to poor decisions, and understanding when to sell, when to hold, and when to walk away is a skill developed only through experience and reflection. As we move forward, the next part will explore the future of the 1962 D Lincoln cent, how changing technology, online marketplaces, and new generations of collectors are reshaping the market, because coins do not exist in isolation, they exist in a living ecosystem, and understanding where that ecosystem is heading is just as important as understanding where it has been. Part 6. Now we lift our eyes from the present moment and begin looking forward, because the story of the 1962 D Lincoln cent is not frozen in the past, it is still evolving, shaped by technology, generational change, and the way information moves in the modern world, and this future-facing perspective is critical for anyone who truly wants to understand where real value may come from over time. In earlier decades, knowledge about coins moved slowly, passed through books, small collector clubs, and specialized magazines, meaning that many rare varieties remained undiscovered or misunderstood for years, sometimes entire lifetimes. But today the internet has accelerated discovery to an unprecedented level, allowing collectors across the world to share images, compare findings, and debate classifications within minutes, and this constant communication has both strengthened and complicated the market for coins like the 1962 D cent. High-resolution photography has changed everything, because details that once required physical access to a coin can now be examined digitally, allowing errors, doubled dies, and die states to be identified and documented with precision. And this has led to new varieties being recognized even decades after the coins were minted, proving that the book on the 1962 D cent is not closed, and may never be fully closed. At the same time, digital platforms have amplified exaggeration, because dramatic claims travel faster than cautious analysis, and this creates waves of excitement followed by disappointment, and learning to navigate this environment requires emotional discipline as much as technical skill, because not every viral post represents a genuine discovery, and not every extraordinary price claim reflects a real transaction. Younger collectors are entering the hobby with different motivations than previous generations, often drawn by the thrill of discovery, the possibility of sudden value, and the storytelling aspect of coins, and this demographic shift has increased interest in accessible series like Lincoln cents, where entry costs are low but potential intrigue is high, and this renewed interest helps sustain demand for high-quality and unusual examples of the 1962 D cent. Another factor shaping the future is professional grading technology itself, which continues to evolve, incorporating better imaging, stricter standards, and more refined population tracking, and as grading becomes more precise, the separation between truly elite coins and merely attractive ones becomes clearer, concentrating value at the top and leaving average examples behind, a trend already visible in many modern coin series. Environmental and economic factors also play a subtle role, because copper prices, inflation, and shifts in investment behavior influence how people perceive physical assets, and during times of uncertainty, tangible objects with history often regain appeal, drawing attention back to coins as both cultural artifacts and stores of value. Even if most collectors insist that passion, not profit, is their primary motivation, the long-term survival of the 1962 D-cent as a collectible depends on education, because without accurate information, myths overwhelm facts, and markets become distorted, but with education, appreciation deepens, and coins are valued not just for what they might be worth, but for what they represent, and this deeper appreciation creates stability rather than speculation. Collectors who succeed across generations understand that the greatest rewards often come not from chasing the loudest claims, but from quietly building knowledge, carefully selecting examples, and allowing time to work in their favor, because rarity often reveals itself slowly, and value often follows understanding, not the other way around. As we continue toward the next part, the focus will shift even deeper into the emotional and personal side of collecting, the moments of doubt, excitement, frustration, and fulfillment that define the journey, because behind every coin, including every 1962 D Lincoln cent, there is a human story, and it is these human stories that ultimately give metal its meaning. At this stage, the conversation becomes deeply personal, because long before a coin ever reaches an auction block or a grading slab, it passes through the hands and emotions of individuals, and the 1962 D Lincoln cent has done this millions of times, quietly moving through pockets, jars, drawers, and collections, absorbing human intention without anyone realizing it. For many collectors, the first encounter with a 1962 D cent that feels different is not dramatic at all, it is subtle, a pause, a second look, a feeling that something about the coin does not quite match the hundreds of others seen before, and that pause is important, because it represents awareness, the moment when routine breaks and curiosity takes over, and every major discovery in numismatics begins with that same pause. Doubt follows quickly, because the mind immediately questions itself, wondering if this is just imagination, wishful thinking, or ignorance, and this emotional tension is one of the defining characteristics of collecting, because hope and skepticism constantly battle, and learning to balance them is a skill developed over years, not days. Many people abandon the process at this point, dismissing the coin and moving on, but those who persist begin researching, comparing images, reading old articles, watching auction results, and slowly building a mental framework that allows them to evaluate what they are seeing more objectively, and this process, though slow, transforms excitement into confidence. Frustration is inevitable, because most coins that seem promising at first do not turn out to be rare or valuable, and this repetition of disappointment can wear people down, but it also sharpens judgment, because each false alarm teaches what not to look for, and over time the noise fades and the signal becomes clearer. There is also a quiet joy in collecting that has nothing to do with money, a satisfaction in understanding history through small objects, in holding something that existed during another era, and in knowing that a 1962 D cent was minted at a time when the world stood on the edge of nuclear confrontation, yet daily life continued, commerce continued, and coins continued to be made, used, and forgotten. For some collectors, the 1962 D cent becomes a symbol of patience, because it is common enough to study extensively, yet complex enough to never fully exhaust, offering endless variation in condition, color, strike, and die state, and this balance keeps people engaged year after year without the pressure of chasing impossibly rare trophies. Stories circulate within families as well, about a relative who saved pennies, about a jar that was never opened, about a coin that looked strange but was spent anyway, and these stories create emotional value that cannot be measured in dollars, yet often motivate people to begin collecting in the first place, turning memory into action. Even when a coin is eventually sold, the experience lingers, because the knowledge gain remains, and many collectors who sell one significant coin use the proceeds not to leave the hobby, but to deepen their involvement, upgrading collections, acquiring books, or mentoring others, keeping the cycle alive. Ultimately, the 1962 D Lincoln cent teaches a quiet lesson, that value is layered, that not everything meaningful is immediately obvious, and that persistence often matters more than luck, because while the dream of an unimaginable price captures attention, the reality of collecting is built on small moments, repeated effort, and respect for detail. As this long exploration continues, what becomes clear is that the coin itself is only part of the story, and that the real transformation happens in the collector, whose perception of ordinary objects changes forever, and once that transformation occurs, every coin, including the humble 1962 D cent, becomes a doorway rather than an endpoint. As we move further along, the focus naturally shifts from individual experience to legacy, because every collector, whether they realize it or not, is part of a chain that stretches backward and forward through time, and the 1962 D Lincoln cent sits quietly within that chain, carrying the marks not only of the mint that produced it, but of the people who studied it, saved it, questioned it, and passed it on. Legacy in coin collecting is not always about wealth, it is often about knowledge. Because coins survive longer than their owners, and the information attached to them determines how they will be understood in the future, and this is why careful labeling, documentation, and honest description matters so much, especially for coins like the 1962 D cent that exist in huge numbers but only reveal their true interest when properly contextualized. Collectors who think long-term often consider what will happen to their collections when they are no longer around, whether their coins will be dispersed, sold, or inherited, and this awareness influences how they collect, pushing them toward clarity rather than chaos, and toward quality rather than quantity. Because a focused collection tells a story that others can continue to read, education plays a central role here, because every generation of collectors must rediscover the basics, learn to separate fact from fiction, and decide what matters to them, and the myths surrounding modern sense, including exaggerated value claims, become teaching tools rather than obstacles when addressed honestly, showing how easily information can be distorted and how important critical thinking truly is. Mentorship is another quiet force in the hobby, because most serious collectors can trace their development back to someone who took the time to explain, correct, and encourage them, and these relationships often form around common coins like the 1962 D cent, which provide a low-risk platform for learning before moving on to more expensive material. From a historical perspective, the Lincoln Cent series itself serves as a record of American values, politics, economics, and technology, and the 1962 D cent reflects a moment of stability before dramatic change, a time when copper was still affordable, designs were still traditional, and the idea of radically altering coinage composition had not yet become unavoidable. The idea of ultimate value, whether realistic or fantastical, fades slightly at this stage, replaced by a broader understanding that markets are temporary but artifacts endure, and that even if no 1962 D cent ever sells for unimaginable sums, the collective effort of studying, preserving, and appreciating them still has meaning. For some collectors, the end goal is completion, finishing a date-anman set or a registry set, while for others it is exploration, constantly searching for new varieties and unanswered questions, and the 1962 D cent accommodates both mindsets, offering both closure and curiosity in equal measure. As the series nears its conclusion, the final part will bring everything together, reflecting on what the 1962 D Lincoln Cent truly represents, beyond rumors and numbers, and why its story continues to resonate with collectors around the world, reminding us that even the smallest objects can carry the weight of history, effort, and imagination. As everything begins to come together, it becomes clear that the 1962 D Lincoln Cent is not defined by a single number, a single rumor, or a single discovery, but by accumulation of time, of attention, of human curiosity layered over decades, and this is why the coin continues to matter long after it has lost any practical purchasing power. When people first hear stories about extraordinary values attached to small coins, disbelief is often the dominant reaction, yet disbelief itself is part of the journey, because it pushes questions, and questions lead to research, and research leads to understanding, and through that process the coin stops being just an object and starts becoming a subject, something to be studied rather than simply judged. The 1962 D cent represents a kind of threshold coin, sitting quietly between eras, old enough to belong to history, yet modern enough to feel familiar, and this position makes it ideal for reflection, because it allows collectors to see how value evolves, how narratives form, and how meaning is assigned over time, sometimes accurately, sometimes not. Every mark on the coin, every tiny scratch, spot, or line, becomes part of a story, not just of minting, but of use, storage, neglect, or care, and learning to read these marks is like learning a language, one that communicates without words, requiring patience and humility rather than haste. The global nature of modern collecting has also changed perception, because a coin struck in Denver can now be examined, debated, and valued by someone thousands of miles away, and this global audience amplifies both knowledge and misconception, creating an environment where information must be filtered carefully to remain meaningful. Over time, many collectors realize that the thrill they chased at the beginning, the dream of sudden, overwhelming value, slowly transforms into something steadier, a respect for process, for evidence, for craftsmanship, and for continuity, and this transformation is perhaps the most valuable outcome of all, because it changes how people interact with history itself. Of the 1962 D Lincoln Cent, when viewed through this lens, becomes less about what it might be worth and more about what it teaches, about patience, skepticism, curiosity, and the joy of learning something deeply, even when the answers are not dramatic or immediate. As the final part approaches, the story is no longer about proving or disproving extraordinary claims, but about recognizing that collecting is a journey rather than a destination, and that every coin, regardless of its market price, offers an opportunity to engage with the past in a tangible way, grounding imagination in reality. The last chapter will close this long exploration not with a number, but with perspective, because in the end, what stays with a collector is not the rumor or the price, but the understanding gained along the way, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing more clearly than before. As we step into this final stretch of reflection, everything slows down, because understanding reaches a point where urgency fades and clarity takes its place, and the 1962 D Lincoln Cent now stands fully revealed, not as a miracle object, not as a myth, but as a mirror, reflecting the intentions, hopes, and discipline of the people who study it. By now it becomes obvious that coins do not magically become valuable on their own. Value is assigned through consensus, documentation, and sustained interest, and when those elements align, prices rise naturally, but when they do not, even the most dramatic claims dissolve under scrutiny, and this realization is freeing rather than disappointing, because it replaces fantasy with control. Collectors who stay long enough in the hobby eventually reach a calm understanding that searching is more important than finding, that learning is more rewarding than winning, and that even if no 1962D cent ever reaches a headline-grabbing price, the effort spent understanding it was never wasted, because it reshaped how the collector thinks. The idea of worth big money slowly evolves here, because worth is no longer measured only in dollars, but in experience, in sharpened observation, in patience earned through repetition, and in the confidence to say this is ordinary or this is unusual without needing validation from hype or rumor. What truly endures is the skill set developed along the way, the ability to evaluate evidence, to resist emotional decisions, to question extraordinary claims, and to appreciate subtle detail, and these skills extend far beyond coins, quietly influencing how collectors approach other areas of life. The 1962D Lincoln cent becomes a reference point, a mental benchmark against which other coins are compared, and in that role it continues to teach, long after the initial excitement fades, proving that even the most common objects can become powerful tools for learning when approached with seriousness and respect. In the end, this long journey reveals something simple but profound, that the real treasure was never guaranteed to be found in copper, but in understanding, and once that understanding is gained, no rumor, no exaggerated number, no false promise can take it away, and with that clarity, the story naturally prepares itself to close, not with disappointment, but with completion, because the purpose has been fulfilled, the layers have been explored, and the 1962D Lincoln cent has given everything it had to give, leaving behind not a promise of instant fortune, but a foundation of knowledge that lasts far longer than any price ever could. As we approach this stage, something subtle but important happens in the collector's mind, because by now the excitement has matured into awareness, and the 1962D Lincoln cent is no longer being chased, it is being understood, and this shift changes everything, because understanding removes fear, removes desperation, and replaces them with quiet confidence. At this point, many collectors look back and realize how their thinking has evolved, how at the beginning the focus was on headlines, on shocking prices, on the dream of instant transformation, but over time that focus softened, and in its place grew respect for process, detail, and truth. And this evolution is not accidental, it is the natural result of sustained attention. The 1962D cent becomes a kind of teacher coin, one that forces patience because it is common, yet rewards patience because within its commonness exist layers that only reveal themselves slowly, and this balance is rare, because too much rarity intimidates beginners, and too much commonness bores experts, but this coin manages to hold both ends together. There is also a quiet discipline that develops here, a habit of checking facts before believing claims, of comparing multiple sources, of asking not just what is it worth, but why would it be worth that, and these questions protect collectors from manipulation, disappointment, and self-deception, which are constant threats in any market driven by emotion. At this level, the idea of extreme values becomes almost symbolic rather than literal, representing the human desire for meaning, recognition, and reward, and once this is understood, exaggerated numbers lose their power, because the collector no longer needs them to stay motivated or engaged. The coin itself does not change, it remains a small copper disc struck in Denver in 1962, but the relationship to it changes, and this is perhaps the most important lesson of all, that objects remain static, but understanding is dynamic. Growing, refining, and deepening over time. Collectors who reach this stage often become educators without realizing it, correcting misinformation gently, sharing experience freely, and encouraging others to slow down and learn, and in doing so, they strengthen the entire collecting community, ensuring that knowledge survives even when trends fade. There is also peace here, a sense that the journey has been worthwhile regardless of outcome, because even if no extraordinary coin is ever found, the time spent learning was not empty, it was formative, and this realization frees collectors from regret and impatience. As the story moves toward its conclusion, what remains is not the question of how much a coin could be worth, but what it has already given, in focus, discipline, curiosity, and connection to history, and these are values that cannot be graded, slabbed, or sold, yet they endure. The final part will bring this entire exploration to rest, not by ending curiosity, but by grounding it, reminding us why collecting exists in the first place, and why even a single cent, when examined deeply enough, can carry a lifetime of meaning. And here we arrive at the culmination of this long exploration, the final reflection on the 1962D Lincoln cent, a coin that at first glance appears small, ordinary, and easily overlooked, yet, as we have seen, carries layers of history, technique, human intention, and collector psychology that make it far richer than its simple copper composition would suggest. In understanding this coin, we are not merely counting dollars or seeking headlines, we are tracing the story of a nation, a minting process, and countless individuals who interacted with it, whether consciously or unknowingly. By now it is clear that the true value of the 1962D Lincoln cent is multidimensional. On one hand, there is the tangible, the solid copper composition, the precise weight of 3.11 grams, the design elements of Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, and the subtle variations in strike, die state, and mint mark that differentiate ordinary coins from rare varieties. On the other hand, there is the intangible, the story each coin carries, the lessons it teaches about observation, patience, skepticism, and the human desire to find meaning in ordinary objects. The myths and rumors about astronomical values, while captivating, serve another purpose beyond mere exaggeration. They reveal the hopes and dreams that collectors bring to their hobby, the allure of transforming something as small as a 1-cent coin into a symbol of fortune and achievement. These stories remind us that collecting is as much about psychology and storytelling as it is about metallurgy and numismatics, and that understanding these layers is key to being a wise and informed collector. The journey through this coin also teaches the importance of method and discipline. Coin roll hunting, careful examination under magnification, accurate weight measurement, proper storage, detailed documentation, and selective submission for grading are not just technical skills, they are habits that cultivate patience, focus, and long-term vision. The 1962 D Lincoln cent, in all its commonness and occasional rarities, becomes a training ground for developing these skills. Sharpening the collector's eye and mind, emotion and experience are equally critical. Each pause over a seemingly ordinary coin, each flash of doubt or curiosity, every frustration from false hope, and every thrill from discovery contributes to a deeper understanding. These moments forge a connection to the past and to the broader collecting community, and they instill a quiet satisfaction that no market price alone could ever provide. Ultimately, the story of the 1962 D Lincoln cent is not about chasing impossible sums, nor is it about claiming dramatic financial success. It is about learning to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to recognize layers of meaning that extend beyond immediate appearances, and to engage with history, craftsmanship, and human curiosity in a way that endures long after the coin has changed hands. The legends, exaggerated claims, and sensational stories all fade when compared to the real, lived experience of careful observation, persistent study, and growing knowledge. So, as we close this long and detailed exploration, it is important to remember that every coin is more than metal, it is a vessel of history, culture, and human attention. The 1962 D Lincoln cent, humble yet remarkable, exemplifies this truth. Whether found in circulation, inherited in a jar, or preserved in a professional collection, it continues to teach, to challenge, and to inspire, reminding collectors and enthusiasts that the true worth of a coin is measured not only in dollars, but in the understanding, curiosity, and satisfaction it generates. And with that, our journey through the 1962 D Lincoln cent comes to an end, its story fully explored, its lessons laid bare, and its place in numismatic history secure, not by rumor or speculation, but by the careful, patient, and thoughtful attention of those who choose to truly see it.